There comes a time when silence is no longer weakness, it becomes power. Power that builds while you quietly rise. Power that watches while others laugh. Power that waits while they betray, slander, mock, and scheme. But I need you to listen closely now, because the pain they caused you has not gone unnoticed. The tears you cried alone have not been forgotten. The wounds they gave you in the dark are being counted in the light. Your enemies may think they've won, but what they've really done is built their own downfall. You didn't need to fight back. You didn't need to seek revenge. You just kept walking, kept healing, kept building. And that's what's dangerous about you, because you didn't break. You bent. You stumbled, but you did not break. And every time they tried to destroy your spirit, they unknowingly lit a fire under your purpose. Some people think they can play with good hearts like it's a game. They think kindness is weakness. They think betrayal is just business. But life has a way of spinning the wheel. Karma doesn't need your help. It already knows their address. And what's coming for them is everything they never saw coming. You see, when they hurt you, they weren't just messing with flesh and blood. They were messing with purpose, with destiny. And destiny always wins. When you walk with integrity, when you stay silent instead of getting even, when you choose peace over pettiness, that's when the universe steps in. That's when justice gets personal. Not loud, not fast, but devastating. You're not just someone who got hurt, you're someone who got awakened. That pain wasn't meant to destroy you, it was meant to develop you. You don't even know the level of strength you've gained until life puts you back in the same situation and you react with silence, with clarity, with confidence. And they look at you confused because you no longer respond like the old version of you. They thought the pain would break you. They thought their betrayal, their cruelty, their silence when you needed them the most, that all of it would crush you. But what they didn't realize was that every ounce of that pain didn't kill you. It planted you. You see, some people think pain is an ending. They believe hurt is a conclusion, that it signals defeat, failure, collapse. But for some souls, for yours, pain was the beginning. It was the ground. It was the soil. The darkness they buried you in, thinking it would be your grave, became the place of your rebirth. They didn't know you were a seed. And seeds don't scream when they're buried. They don't protest when covered in dirt. They just get ready to grow quietly, powerfully. You didn't have to announce your comeback. You didn't have to post about your pain or parade your wounds to gain pity. You let the soil do its job. You let life cover you, break you open, press you down. And even when the weight felt unbearable, even when the tears became your silent companions at night, you kept your roots digging deeper. That's what people don't understand about pain. The very thing that was meant to suffocate you often ends up nurturing you. The betrayal didn't destroy you. It revealed who never truly belonged in your journey. The abandonment didn't ruin you. It taught you how to stand alone. And the rejection, it redirected you to places you would have never dared to walk toward while still clinging to their approval. They may have thought they were burying a mistake, a weak person, a broken heart. But what they buried was destiny. What they covered in lies was resilience. What they thought was your end was the very beginning of a more powerful, more focused, more refined version of you. The dirt they threw on your name only added pressure to your promise. And pressure is what activates growth. You never needed applause to rise. You never needed their approval to survive. And now, as you stretch your way toward the light, they stand confused, because what they expected to rot in silence is now blooming in strength. Some people are so used to using others that they don't recognize when they've mishandled someone chosen by purpose. They treat loyalty as weakness. They view love as leverage. They think the heart you gave them was a tool for control. But they didn't understand you were never desperate, you were devoted. And when that devotion was betrayed, something inside you awakened. A different kind of strength. The type of strength that doesn't seek revenge but understands timing. The kind of strength that doesn't beg to be understood but chooses peace over chaos. Because you knew, even in your lowest moment, that this wasn't the end. You had a quiet knowing that storms pass, that seeds bloom, that darkness is temporary, and purpose always survives. The people who tried to bury you are starting to feel the shift, not because you scream back or expose them, but because your life is growing. Your energy is different. Your silence speaks louder than any argument. You're not trying to prove yourself anymore. You're just walking in your truth. And the beautiful thing is, they're watching it happen. They're witnessing the one they left behind rise without bitterness. And that's what haunts people the most. Not when you fight back, but when you rise above it all. Because rising quietly is the loudest revenge. Growing without needing to gloat is the most powerful response to betrayal. They underestimated you because they never took the time to understand you. They judged your heart without seeing your spirit. They confused humility with weakness and silence with surrender. But you were never weak. You were just focused. You were just discerning. You were just preserving your energy for the right season. And now that season is here. Growth season, healing season, power season. The version of you that is emerging from the dirt is not the same one they buried. This version knows its worth. This version doesn't chase. This version no longer entertains what threatens its peace. The pain they caused you forced you into solitude. And in that solitude, you found something greater than approval. You found clarity. You began to remember who you are. You began to feel your strength. You realized you were never meant to be accepted by those who couldn't value you. That kind of acceptance always comes with a cost. And you're done paying for belonging in places that couldn't hold your greatness. So now, as you rise with boundaries, with wisdom, with discernment. You don't give your heart away recklessly anymore. You don't waste your time trying to water dead soil. You plant yourself where you're nourished, where you're valued, where growth is mutual. People often look at someone's glow up and say, I always knew they had it in them, but they didn't. If they did, they wouldn't have left. They wouldn't have tried to break you. They wouldn't have underestimated your silence or mocked your vulnerability. They didn't see it until the roots started pushing through the soil, until your life started blooming in ways that could no longer be denied. Now they're curious. Now they remember your name. Now they're wondering how the one they walked away from became the one walking in purpose. And the answer is simple. You grew through what you never deserved. You transformed pain into power. You let the dirt become your teacher instead of your prison. You're not rising because of them. You're rising in spite of them. That's what makes your story powerful. That's what makes your strength rare. You didn't let bitterness harden you. You let experience shape you. You didn't seek vengeance. You sought healing. You chose to grow when staying broken was the easier path. And now the very ones who tried to diminish you are faced with the reality that nothing they did could keep you down. Your story is no longer about what they did to you. It's about what you did with what they did. And that story inspires, it empowers, it heals others walking through their own darkness, waiting for their own roots to take hold. You were seed, they just didn't know. They saw you as disposable, replaceable, a temporary fixture in their self-centered world. But the soil had another plan. The pain had a deeper purpose. And now you're not just surviving, you're thriving. Your growth is sacred. Your resilience is holy. Your journey is no longer about proving people wrong. It's about proving to yourself that the storm didn't win. The betrayal didn't break you. The silence didn't bury you. Every single moment of pain was preparation. And now the world will witness what happens when someone tries to destroy a soul chosen to rise. There's something powerful about silence that most people never understand. They look at it as weakness. They mistake your quiet for surrender. They mock it, thinking you're too afraid to speak, too broken to fight, too soft to stand up. But the truth is, your silence was never weakness. It was discipline. It was wisdom. It was strategy. While they talked, you listened. While they boasted, you built. While they laughed, you learned. And while they assumed you were shrinking, you were only preparing. That stillness wasn't you giving up. It was you gearing up Because real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sits in the shadows until the right moment arrives. They never saw the inner war you were fighting because you chose not to broadcast your battles. You kept your pain private, your plans hidden, your healing sacred. And for that, they labeled you weak. They couldn't see the strength it took not to react, not to lash out, not to give them the same venom they gave you. It's easy to respond. It's easy to clap back. But it takes incredible power to remain composed when your name is being dragged, when your intentions are being misunderstood, when your heart is being misjudged. You weren't silent because you had nothing to say. You were silent because not everything deserves your energy. They mocked your silence in rooms you didn't even know existed. They built false narratives. They told stories to make you small. But what they didn't know is that every second you remained still, you were learning how to move different. You were growing your roots deeper. You were gaining clarity. You were pruning dead branches and protecting your peace. The very silence they ridiculed became the soil where your transformation began. They didn't realize that the quiet ones are the most dangerous because we're not looking to be seen. We're looking to be ready, and readiness doesn't come from noise. It comes from stillness. It comes from watching patterns, reading energy, and waiting for divine timing. While they fed off drama, you fed your soul. While they played games, you stayed grounded. You didn't chase validation. You didn't need an audience to feel powerful. You found comfort in solitude and strength in surrender. That silence allowed you to connect with your deepest self, to remember who you are without the chaos, without the confusion, without the noise of opinions. And once you remembered, you started to rebuild, not loudly, not publicly, but intentionally, one piece at a time. Because you weren't in a rush to prove anything to anyone. You knew your time would come. And when it did, they would have no choice but to acknowledge the very person they thought they had silenced. They thought your silence meant they won, that they had crushed your spirit. But what they didn't see was the fire growing inside you. They didn't feel the quiet resolve building behind your eyes. They couldn't sense the strength forming in your chest every time you chose peace over petty retaliation. You weren't just being silent. You were becoming someone new, someone wiser, someone calmer, someone more dangerous in your stillness than they ever were in their chaos. The people who mock silence are usually the ones who fear it the most. Because silence means you're thinking. Silence means you're observing. Silence means you're not playing their game anymore. You had every right to scream, to fight, to expose. But you chose silence. Not because you couldn't speak, but because you didn't want to lower yourself to their level. That's the kind of restraint that only comes from someone who knows who they are. That's not weakness. That's power under control. And now they're starting to feel that power. They're starting to sense that the quiet person they dismissed is no longer the same. You've shifted. You've elevated. You've detached from what no longer serves you. And that's terrifying for people who relied on your silence to control you, because now your silence isn't passive, it's protective, it's purposeful, and it's prophetic. You used to be afraid of being misunderstood. You used to want to explain yourself to make them see your heart, but not anymore. You've realized that people committed to misunderstanding you don't deserve access to your truth. Your silence now isn't about fear, it's about freedom. You're free from needing to be validated, free from proving your worth, free from playing roles just to be accepted. And in that freedom, you found power. The kind of power that can't be faked, the kind of power that can only be earned in the dark, in the quiet, in the sacred space between breaking and blooming. Let them laugh, let them guess, let them fill the silence with their projections. You don't owe them anything. The version of you they hurt no longer exists. You've evolved in the silence. You've become sharper, calmer, more focused. You no longer need to be understood. You need to be respected. And your silence demands it. It commands attention in a way words never could, because it shows you're not desperate to be seen. You're not clinging to validation. You've mastered the art of restraint. And that makes you dangerous, to the ones who used to control you with noise. Silence teaches you who's really for you. It reveals who panics when you stop talking, who grows uncomfortable when you stop explaining, who shows their true colors when you stop feeding their ego. In your silence, the masks fell off. The people who once pretended to support you revealed their true intentions, and that was a gift. Because now you move with clarity, now you protect your space with purpose, now your peace is non-negotiable. The people who once took your silence for submission are realizing it was the calm before the storm of your awakening, your rising, your becoming. There's a quiet strength in people who've learned not to react. You've become immune to provocation. You've learned to let fools argue while you move in peace. You've learned to prioritize your energy. And most importantly, you've learned to grow in silence and let your results do the talking. They used to laugh at your silence. Now they're silenced by your growth. That's the full circle power of staying grounded when others wanted you to crumble. That's the revenge you never had to lift a finger to get. Because the truth is, while they were busy creating noise, you were becoming unstoppable. You don't owe them a reaction. You don't owe them a single word. What you owe yourself is peace, is progress, is presence. And that's exactly what your silence brought you. They'll keep wondering how you're still rising without their support. They'll keep guessing what your next move is. But you've learned now you don't need to announce what you're building. You just need to build. You don't need to correct every lie. You just need to live in truth. And when they look back and see the strength that came from your silence, they'll realize they never should have underestimated the quiet one. Because while they were mocking your stillness, you were preparing for a greatness they'll never be able to touch. They thought they were clever. They smiled to your face and stabbed you in your absence. They manipulated situations, turned others against you, and made you look like the villain in a story where you were the one bleeding. But the thing about the dark is it offers a false sense of security. It makes people believe they're untouchable. It gives cowards a stage to perform cruelty without consequence. But there's another thing about the dark. It only lasts for a season. Light always returns. And when it does, it exposes everything. Every lie they told, every secret alliance they formed, every cruel motive they disguised as concern, all of it will come into the open when they least expect it. Not because you forced it, but because truth has a rhythm and justice has patience. You might have stayed quiet. You might have walked away instead of retaliating. You may have taken the high road when the low road seemed more tempting. And maybe that made you feel like they got away with it. Maybe it made you question whether being good-hearted even matters in a world that rewards deception. But don't confuse delay with denial. Just because karma hasn't knocked on their door yet doesn't mean it's not coming. It moves in silence. It waits for the perfect moment. Not to humiliate, but to restore balance. To make clear what was hidden. To bring healing to the one who suffered and lessons to the one who caused it. But they underestimated the power of truth. They underestimated the strength of time. Time doesn't just pass, it gathers. It gathers evidence, character, intent. Time collects what the moment conceals, and when that time matures, everything becomes clear. The people who once believed their lies will see. The ones who once joined their side will question. And the world they built on false narratives will start to collapse from the weight of truth. You won't need to raise your voice. You won't need to get revenge. Because nothing speaks louder than consequences delivered by hands that are not your own. It's easy to perform innocence. It's easy to look composed while chaos brews underneath. But masks get heavy, lies get tangled, and eventually the darkness they tried to live in becomes too loud to ignore. They may have celebrated when they thought they broke you. They may have clapped for each other while your name was dragged through dirt. But what they didn't know is that the same silence they mocked was the space where karma took notes. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every backhanded move was recorded. Not by you, but by life itself. And when life decides the moment has come, exposure is not just possible, It's inevitable. There's a strange peace that comes when you no longer need to fight to be believed, when you no longer crave an apology or feel the need to explain, because you realize that the truth has its own voice. It speaks when you no longer have to. And when it speaks with power, with clarity, with undeniable weight. The people who tried to twist the story will be silenced by the unfolding of facts they can't escape. The people who believed them will have to reconsider everything they thought they knew. And you'll stand there, not as the victim, but as the one who survived the darkness without becoming it. What they did in the dark might have cost you your peace, your reputation, even your relationships. But it didn't take your character. It didn't take your light, and because of that, you remained aligned with something bigger than revenge. You stayed aligned with purpose. And purpose protects. Purpose restores. Purpose attracts what you lost in ways you never expected. You didn't lose. You were refined. You weren't broken. You were recalibrated. And the very people who celebrated your fall will have to witness your rise. That's how karma works. It's not fueled by anger. It's powered by alignment. It returns to you not what they did, but what you deserve. People forget that your silence isn't absence. It's observation, it's preparation. They mistake it for defeat, when in reality, it's the space where justice is being formed. You didn't need to retaliate because you trusted the process. You let the universe, God, life, whatever name you give it, handle what was beyond your control. And now that same process is moving quietly, powerfully, is rearranging tables, opening eyes, and revealing truths that can't be unseen. They won't see it coming. That's the beauty of karma. It strikes not with fury, but with precision. At the exact moment they feel safest, the consequences arrive. Not to destroy, but to humble. You don't have to carry the weight of what they did anymore. You don't have to carry the burden of trying to make people see what you endured. Let the light do its work. Let the truth unfold. You have more important things to focus on, like healing, like growth, like stepping fully into the life that was delayed but not denied. You were never meant to stay stuck in the pain. You were meant to rise through it, to use it, to evolve because of it. And now, that rising is happening, not out of spite, but out of divine timing. The same timing that will bring everything hidden into the open. You never had to become like them to overcome them. You didn't need to match their cruelty. You just needed to stay true to your soul. And because you did, there is a peace reserved for you that no one can steal. There is justice moving in your favor that no lie can block. What they did in the dark is about to face exposure in the light, not because you demanded it, but because truth always finishes what silence starts. And the day will come when everything they did to try and destroy you will be the very thing that destroys their illusion. Not by your hands, but by the hands of consequence itself. It felt like a loss at first. When they hurt you, it tore through your spirit like a blade you didn't see coming. You trusted them. You gave them a piece of yourself, maybe even your whole heart, and in return, they handed you pain, betrayal, silence, indifference. It felt like the ground was ripped from under you, like the version of life you were building was shattered without warning. You walked away thinking something was wrong with you. You wondered what you did to deserve the wound. You called it a loss. But what you didn't know then was that pain was not your punishment. It was your redirection. It wasn't there to end your story. It was there to correct your course, to pull you from places you had no business settling in, from people who never truly saw you, from situations that would have delayed your destiny. You see, when people hurt you, it's easy to look at it as rejection, but sometimes rejection is simply protection in disguise. The path you were on may have been familiar, even comforting in its routine, but it wasn't aligned with your highest self. It wasn't leading you to your fullest potential. And so the universe, life, or God, whatever you call it, intervened in the most painful way, through a door slammed in your face, through a heart that walked away, through a betrayal that burned deep, not because you were meant to suffer, but because you were meant to awaken. You were meant to rise in a direction they couldn't go, in a direction you wouldn't have chosen unless you were forced to move. That heartbreak, that disappointment, that abandonment, It wasn't the end. It was the redirection your soul had been waiting for. You didn't lose anything that was truly meant for you. And the longer you mourn what left, the longer you delay what's trying to enter, because pain can blind you. It can convince you that what you lost was your only shot at happiness, love, purpose. But sometimes life has to remove the counterfeit before it can deliver the real. And often, it doesn't do it gently. It pulls things apart violently so there's no turning back. It allows people to hurt you so deeply that going back becomes impossible. It shakes your world so hard that standing still is no longer an option. And while you may cry and ache and grieve in that moment, a quiet truth begins to grow. You weren't broken, you were broken open. They thought they damaged you, they thought they dimmed your light, but what they did was set you free. Free from illusions, free from attachments that no longer served you, free from trying to force something that was never meant to fit. And in that freedom, you found clarity. You started to see that the version of you who loved them was loyal. But that version was also losing themselves trying to hold on. You started to see that the version of you who kept showing up was faithful, but also afraid of walking alone. And then something shifted. You started to rebuild slowly, silently, purposefully. And you realized you didn't lose. You were just no longer walking in circles. There are some doors that only open through pain. There are some parts of yourself you only discover when you're stripped bare. That heartbreak was a mirror. It showed you what you needed to heal, what you needed to release, and who you were always meant to become. They weren't the destination. They were the detour, the disruption. And the moment they hurt you was the moment the clock started ticking on your rebirth. You may not have seen it then, but looking back, you'll realize their exit was your entrance. Their silence was your invitation. Their betrayal was your breakthrough. Because what tried to destroy you became the soil for your strength. You weren't losing, you were shedding. You were evolving. You were releasing everything that kept you small so you could rise into everything that's calling your name. Pain doesn't come to punish, it comes to awaken. And the pain they caused wasn't the end of your story, it was the part that rerouted your spirit, that pushed you to ask better questions, to seek deeper truths, to connect with your purpose instead of your past. You stopped trying to fix what was falling apart and instead learned how to rebuild from within. That's where your power returned. Not when they came back, not when they apologized, but when you realized you didn't need either to keep moving forward. You are not who you were when they hurt you. And that's a blessing. Because now you move differently. Now you protect your peace. Now you honor your intuition. You've learned to stop chasing after people who don't recognize your value. You've learned that peace is more precious than attention. That love should never cost you your self-respect. That loyalty without reciprocity is self-betrayal. These lessons came wrapped in pain, but they gifted you wisdom. They redirected your focus. And they forced you to build a life that didn't revolve around being chosen by anyone but yourself. The people who hurt you might never understand what they did. They may never feel remorse or offer an apology. But that's not your burden to carry, because their actions aren't your reflection, they're their own. And while they move on unaware, you move forward enlightened. You move forward equipped. They took something from you, yes, but you took something far greater from the experience. You took back your voice, your worth, your direction, and now, instead of being lost in their absence, you're found in your own presence. You're not waiting for closure from them. You've given that to yourself. You've chosen to grow forward. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were never the failure, that their betrayal didn't mean you were unlovable, that the way they left didn't define your value. It was never about them. It was always about you, about your journey back to self, back to the version of you who doesn't settle, who doesn't shrink, who doesn't need outside approval to walk in confidence. You were redirected because you were meant for more. And now that you've seen your worth in the aftermath of the pain, you'll never go back to who you used to be. You didn't lose, you were rerouted. And that reroute might have been painful, lonely, confusing, but it led you here to strength, to clarity, to a version of yourself that no longer lives for the temporary comfort of being liked, but for the permanent power of being true. You've learned to trust the detours, to bless the closed doors, to see the heartbreak not as punishment, but as preparation. You've learned to thank the people who left, not because they were right to hurt you, but because they helped redirect you to everything they could never offer. You didn't lose. You were placed, positioned, realigned. And now nothing can stop the version of you that was born in the pain, but raised by purpose. There are moments in life when the people around you revealed their true hearts, not during your highs, but in the depths of your lows. When everything fell apart for you, when life grew heavy and your name was surrounded by silence instead of support, they showed you exactly who they were. They didn't offer comfort. They didn't ask if you were okay. They clapped for your collapse. They shared your pain like it was gossip. They smiled when they thought they saw the end of you. But what they didn't know was that while they celebrated your downfall, the universe was preparing your elevation. You see, your fall wasn't final. It was foundational. It was the clearing ground for something bigger than they ever imagined. And what they mistook for destruction was simply a divine reset. People love to see you fall when your light threatens the darkness they live in. Your success, your peace, your progress, it made them uncomfortable. And so when you stumbled, they rejoiced. They whispered behind your back, thinking your silence was weakness. They misread your stillness as defeat. But life was only pausing you for refinement. Because elevation doesn't come from applause. It comes from pruning. It comes from breaking, healing, and rebuilding. And while they assumed your story was over, life was rewriting it behind the scenes. Their celebration was premature. Because you were never done. You were just being redesigned. Quietly, powerfully. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't beg to be understood. You didn't retaliate. And that silence confused them. They thought you were drowning when you were learning to breathe deeper. They thought you had no more fight in you, not knowing that your greatest battles are won in the spirit, not on the stage. While they were laughing, life was lifting. While they were plotting, purpose was planning. While they mocked your fall, you were being rerouted to a place they will never be able to follow. That's how elevation works. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for validation. It arrives when the soul is ready, and it always arrives after the crowd thinks you're finished. They thought your delay was your demise. They mistook your silence for surrender. But you were aligning. You were shedding dead weight. You were discovering who's truly with you and who's only around for the spotlight. That pain you carried, it carved space for power. That betrayal you endured, it built your boundaries. That loneliness you faced, it introduced you to your strength. The universe doesn't waste hurt. It recycles it into wisdom. And now that wisdom is carrying you into rooms that they never thought you'd walk into again. Rooms filled with opportunity, with peace, with clarity. And they'll have to watch it happen from the very sidelines they laughed from. You were never meant to stay broken. You were meant to be rebuilt, stronger, wiser, and more focused than ever before. Sometimes life has to remove what was never meant to stay by letting it fail, letting it collapse, letting it crumble in front of you so you stop holding on. And though it hurt to lose what you thought you needed, that loss became the very space that allowed you to rise. The downfall didn't define you, it refined you, it reminded you who you are without the noise, without the crowd, without the illusion of comfort. And that version of you, stripped down, honest, healed, is the one being elevated now. They watched your pain with entertainment. They passed your struggle around like it was a story they owned. But your pain wasn't theirs to mock. It was yours to transform. And transform you did. You kept showing up for yourself even when no one clapped. You kept rising even when no one noticed. You kept believing even when everything around you suggested you shouldn't. That's the kind of strength you can't fake. That's the kind of resilience that doesn't need to scream. It just keeps building quietly until the results speak for themselves, until the shift is so undeniable Even your enemies have no choice but to recognize the glow they once tried to dim. Elevation isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like peace. Sometimes it looks like no longer reacting. Sometimes it looks like walking away from what used to trigger you. You grew in ways they never expected because they were too busy watching your downfall to notice your development. But now, as you walk with more purpose, more grace, and more wisdom, everything they did to destroy you only proves they were never capable of stopping what was divinely appointed. What's meant for you doesn't break when others want it to. It bends, it recalibrates, and then it returns stronger. And now your life is rising in ways that you don't need revenge. The elevation is the response. Let them remember how they treated you when you were low. Let them sit with the reality that while they mocked you, you mastered yourself. Let them wrestle with the fact that their joy came from your pain and that your joy is now protected from their energy. This elevation isn't for show. It's not to prove them wrong. It's because you endured what was meant to break you and you rose anyway. You faced rejection, betrayal, loss, and silence. And instead of folding, you focused. Instead of collapsing, you committed. And now everything they said you'd never be is exactly what you've become. They thought they could write your ending, but they forgot who holds the pen. They forgot that purpose doesn't panic, that destiny doesn't depend on popularity, that favor doesn't fade just because people walk away. You are here now, rising, walking in doors you once prayed for, living in peace you once couldn't imagine. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. That's elevation after devastation. And no matter how they try to rewrite the story, the truth stands tall. You didn't fall apart. You fell into place. The universe was preparing your table while they laughed at your hunger, preparing your healing while they mocked your wounds, preparing your platform while they dismantled your name. But it never mattered what they did, because what's for you flows to you, even when you're on your knees, even when you feel forgotten, even when you're down to your last breath of hope. That's when life starts to shift. That's when elevation begins. Not when you have the crowd, but when you have the courage to rise anyway. When you refuse to stay broken. When you trust the silence more than the noise. When you realize that being underestimated is your secret weapon. Let them remember the laughs. Let them sit with the smirks. Let them carry the weight of knowing they celebrated your pain while you were preparing to fly. They didn't break you, they built the runway. And now that you're rising, you owe no one an explanation. You owe no one your peace. You don't need to revisit the old wounds to prove anything. Just keep rising, keep walking, keep building. Because while they counted you out, heaven was counting the steps to your comeback. And it's here. There's a quiet kind of strength that lives in the one who chooses not to retaliate. In a world where everyone's racing to clap back, to expose, to shame, to get even, choosing not to sink to someone's level is an act of true power. You had every right to respond, every reason to call them out, the lies they told, the damage they caused, the way they twisted your words, turned people against you, left you bleeding while they smiled like nothing happened. It would have made sense for you to strike back, but you didn't. Not because you couldn't, but because you realize who you are doesn't need to live in the mud with those who tried to drag you into it. That moment you chose peace over petty, you didn't fall behind, you rose above. You see, revenge might feel satisfying for a second, but it robs you of your energy. It ties you to them, keeps you orbiting around their drama, and drains your spirit trying to match their chaos. But you broke that cycle. You refused to become what hurt you. You let them go without lashing out. You let the lies breathe while the truth stood silently in your heart. And while they celebrated what they thought was your silence, they missed what was really happening. You were ascending, elevating, growing in the dark, rising in the quiet. Because when you choose not to get even, you're trusting that life will balance what you no longer carry. And it will. Karma has no expiration date. It doesn't need your hands to work. It doesn't need your voice to deliver its justice. It moves according to its own rhythm. And it always arrives when the mask is off and the stage is empty. The same people who walked away from you like you meant nothing, who hurt you and pretended they did, will one day have to sit with what they did. Not because you wished it, but because you walked away clean. You didn't touch the fire they lit. You didn't feed the chaos. You let them go. And that's why karma can reach them. It doesn't have to go through you to do its job. It will meet them right where they left you. Because they thought that place was your end, but it was just the beginning. They laughed when you stayed silent. They misread your stillness as surrender. But they didn't realize how powerful restraint is. They didn't know that the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Not because they react, but because they rise. Because they build in silence and let the results do the talking. While they gossiped, you grew. While they schemed, you strengthened. And while they played games, you stayed grounded. You stopped needing to win a war of words, and you started winning the war within. That's where the real victory always begins. That's where the healing starts. And when you begin to heal, you stop needing to hurt others just to feel whole again. You forgave them not because they deserved it, but because you did. You let go of the bitterness because it was weighing you down. You chose peace over proof. You stopped trying to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And that release didn't just free them, it freed you. It gave you your energy back, your power, your clarity. It reminded you that what they did is on them, but how you respond is always your responsibility. And in that moment of self-control, of silence, of choosing not to get even, you rose into a higher place, a place they can't follow. Because people stuck in cycles of destruction can't reach those who rise with intention. And while they keep living in circles, repeating the same pain they tried to put on you, karma is watching. Not to punish, but to restore balance, to remind them that what they put out returns, that the pain they sowed will one day visit them, not because you demanded it, but because energy moves in cycles. What they did behind closed doors will echo back in ways they never imagined. It may not come in the same form, but it will come. And when it does, they'll remember. Not just what they did, but how you never returned the favor. And that memory will haunt them more than any revenge ever could. They expected you to fall. They expected you to fight. They wanted a reaction. But what they got instead was your distance, your silence, your peace. And that's what bothers them now. Because they didn't just lose your presence, they lost access to the version of you that cared, that forgave quickly, that showed up even when you were hurting. And now all they can do is watch. Watch as your life heals. Watch as your blessings arrive, not because you fought for them, but because you aligned with them. Because you didn't allow their darkness to dim your light. You stayed focused. You stayed rooted. And you kept moving forward. Let them talk. Let them twist the story. Let them live in the false comfort of thinking they got away with it. You don't need to defend yourself anymore. The truth doesn't need to scream. It stands on its own. And the longer you stay silent, the more obvious their lies become. That's what karma does. It exposes gently but thoroughly. It waits until they're comfortable. Then it brings back everything they thought they buried. And you won't have to do a thing. Your hands will be clean, your conscience clear, because you chose to heal, you chose to evolve, and now you carry a peace they will never understand. It takes maturity to hold back, to look at someone who hurt you and not wish them harm, to pray for healing instead of their downfall. That level of strength isn't natural, it's grown. Grown through nights you cried in silence, through days you smiled while broken, through the moments you wanted to give up, but didn't. All of that pain shaped you into someone who doesn't just survive, but thrives. Not by hurting back, but by building something so powerful that their absence becomes irrelevant. That's real revenge. Not destruction, but elevation. Not payback, but peace. And when karma meets them, it won't be loud, it'll be just. You didn't need to ruin their name to reclaim yours. You didn't need to match their lives with your own. You stood in integrity. You stayed true to your values. You didn't throw away your character just to get even, and because of that, you're now walking in favor, in clarity, in growth. Their cruelty didn't kill you. It called something greater out of you. Something solid, something sacred. And now you're building a life on a foundation they can't shake, because it's not built on vengeance, it's built on vision. Keep rising, keep moving forward. Let your healing be your proof, let your peace be your answer. They will look for you in the spaces where they left you, only to realize you've moved, grown, thrived. And while they sit with the consequences of their choices, you'll sit in the abundance of yours. Karma will meet them, not because you asked, but because justice doesn't need your permission. You just had to stay out of the way long enough for it to work. And now that it's working, let it. You've already risen. Some of the deepest betrayals didn't come to destroy you. They came to reveal who was never meant to walk with you any further. It's hard to see it in the moment, especially when the sting is fresh, and the silence from the ones you trusted feels like a punch to the soul. You replay every memory, every word, wondering how something so solid could turn so hollow. But as time passes, the clarity arrives. You start to see that some betrayals weren't curses. They were blessings. Painful blessings, yes, but necessary ones. They cleared your path of people who were only pretending to care. People who smiled in your face but never rooted for you behind your back. People who said the right things but carried the wrong intentions. You thought they were loyal, you thought they were family, but betrayal, it pulled back the curtain on their character. There is a kind of cleansing that comes through betrayal. It forces you to confront what you didn't want to see. The uneasy feeling you ignored. The red flags you explained away. The gut instincts you silenced. You loved them, so you gave them chances. You believed in them, so you made excuses. But betrayal does a lie. It exposes. And when it did, you finally saw what was hidden behind the charm, the convenience, the history. You saw their true capacity for selfishness. You saw how easily they let go of you. And even though it hurt, it also healed. Because you stopped holding space for people who didn't know how to handle your heart. You stopped keeping company with those who were only loyal to their needs, not your soul. Betrayal is a brutal teacher, but it teaches what kindness sometimes can't. It strips the illusion, it tests your identity, and it asks you, who are you when they switch up? Who are you when love turns into lessons? And you faced it. You cried, you grieved, but you learned. You learned that not everyone deserves access to your spirit, that loyalty must be earned, not assumed, that shared memories don't always equal shared value. And most of all, you learned to trust your discernment over your emotions. Because love is beautiful, but love without wisdom is dangerous. And that betrayal taught you wisdom that no smooth season ever could. At first, you thought something was wrong with you. You questioned your worth, your instincts, your decisions. But with time, you realized their betrayal was not a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of their character. You were real with people who only knew how to fake it. You were committed to people who only knew how to take. And that kind of mismatch is bound to collapse eventually. It's not your fault they couldn't honor what you gave. But it would have been your fault to keep giving after they showed you who they truly were. So life stepped in. With the force of a heartbreak, a lie, a silence too loud to ignore, and suddenly everything shifted. There's a strange kind of freedom that follows betrayal. Once the tears dry and the truth settles, you feel it. The weight that lifts, the pressure that disappears. The peace that returns, not because you got an apology, but because you got perspective. You see how much of your energy was spent walking on eggshells, second-guessing yourself, shrinking to make room for people who never expanded for you. You see how much of your light was dimmed trying to avoid offending people who were already uncomfortable with your glow. And now, without them, you feel lighter, freer, more in touch with who you are without their shadow cast over your confidence. Some betrayals are brutal blessings because they end relationships that were only surviving on your effort. You were the one checking in. You were the one forgiving first. You were the one keeping it together while they coasted on your consistency. And when they betrayed you, they removed themselves from a table they were only consuming from. That's the blessing. You no longer have to question who's really for you, because betrayal answered that question in full. It hurt, yes, but it cleared your view. It ended the guessing game. It confirmed what your spirit always knew, that some people were never genuine. They were just convenient. Counterfeit connections are dangerous because they take up space that real ones could be filling. And sometimes betrayal is the only thing strong enough to remove them. As much as you love them, life knew they were blocking your growth. You couldn't expand fully with their weight on your spirit. You couldn't soar while tied to people who only knew how to clip wings. So the betrayal, though painful, became divine surgery. It removed what was infected. It made room for healing. And now the relationships in your life are fewer but purer, quieter but richer. The ones who remain are the ones who see you, hear you, value you, not just when it's easy, but when it's real. You didn't need that kind of love. The kind that turns cold when you're no longer useful. The kind that disappears when you need help. The kind that claps only when you're quiet and compliant. You needed love that's rooted in truth, in growth, in mutual respect. And now, after the betrayal, you stopped settling for anything less. You stopped begging to be understood by people who chose to misunderstand you. You stopped explaining your worth to those who made you question it. And in that, you became stronger. Not colder, but clearer. Not harder, but wiser. And wisdom is the reward for pain you didn't deserve, but overcame anyway. Let them go. Let what happened serve its purpose. Let the betrayal purify your path, because you're walking lighter now. Your circle is smaller but sacred. You're no longer performing for acceptance. You're living in truth. And the truth is, they were never going to go the distance with you. You just loved them enough to believe they would, and that's okay. Your love wasn't the problem. It was their inability to receive it with integrity. That chapter is closed. The mask has fallen. And you're walking forward with open eyes, open hands, and a heart that knows better now. Some betrayals were blessings. They removed distractions. They exposed disloyalty. They ended illusions. And most importantly, they returned you to yourself, to your peace, to your power. You don't carry the weight of their actions anymore. You carry the wisdom. And that wisdom will lead you to connections that don't require performance, to love that doesn't need convincing, to people who match your energy, protect your name, and walk beside you, not out of convenience, but commit. The pain they caused became the path you needed to find your people, your peace, your purpose. And now, you're not just surviving, you're thriving, with a heart no longer attached to counterfeit love. There's a quiet power in the decision not to get revenge. Not because they didn't deserve it, not because what they did didn't hurt, but because you realized your energy was too sacred to be spent proving a point to someone already beneath your character. You are proof that the strongest revenge is no revenge, just success that speaks louder than any wound. You didn't clap back. You didn't try to destroy their name the way they tried to ruin yours. You didn't stoop to their level. You chose to elevate instead. You chose to take every broken piece they left behind and build something unshakable. You chose to heal when bitterness was easier. And that is what they never saw coming. There's something about a person who doesn't retaliate that makes the world stop and look. It confuses the ones who hurt you. They expect anger. They expect you to scream, to fight, to seek revenge. But when you do none of that, when you rise in silence, when you smile without spite, it shakes them, because it means you were never dependent on them for your worth. It means you've mastered something they haven't. Self-control. And that kind of discipline always wins in the long run. While they're still trying to rewrite the past, you're already creating a future so bright, it makes the pain irrelevant. And that's what haunts them most. Not your wrath, but your resilience. You see, real revenge isn't about destruction. It's about transformation. It's about becoming so focused on your growth, your peace, and your purpose that they no longer exist in your world. They became a chapter in your story, not the title. You stopped rereading the pain and started writing a new narrative. And that's what strength looks like. Not getting even, but getting better. Not proving them wrong with words, but with elevation they never thought possible. They tried to break you, but they built your foundation instead. They underestimated you, and now they have to watch what becomes of someone they thought would stay broken. When you choose not to fight back, you give karma room to work, you move out of the way and let life handle what you don't need to carry. The truth is, most people who hurt you are already hurting themselves. That's why they lash out. That's why they betray. That's why they try to tear others down. But you chose healing. You chose to break the cycle. You didn't let the wound become your identity. You didn't let pain turn you into something you're not. And because of that, life is rewarding you with a peace that doesn't come from revenge. It comes from release. And your release made room for success they never believed you'd reach. Your success isn't just about money, status, or recognition. It's about rising above everything that tried to drag you under. It's about waking up and not feeling the weight of their actions anymore. It's about being able to look in the mirror and know that you stayed true to who you are, that you didn't need to become them to survive them. That's real success. That's the kind that can't be faked, the kind that doesn't need an audience, because it's rooted in self-respect, in dignity, in peace. And peace is a language they'll never understand. You chose to grow, and now you're glowing. Not because you had to prove anything, but because you finally saw your own light. They thought they were your ending, but they were only the beginning. They thought their betrayal would define you, but it refined you. Every sleepless night, every tear, every moment you almost gave up was turned into strength. You kept going, you kept building, and the universe, God, whatever you believe in, saw that. It saw your heart, it saw your endurance, and now it's rewarding your restraint, because success that comes from peace will always last longer than victory that comes from pain. You didn't fight for revenge. You prepared for redemption. And now you're living it quietly and completely. You don't need them to acknowledge what they did. You don't need closure from people who were never honest to begin with. The closure is in your growth. It's in your healing. It's in the fact that you're no longer carrying the weight of trying to be seen, heard, or understood by those who were committed to misunderstanding you. That's what success looks like now. Being unbothered, being at peace, creating a life that feels good from the inside, not one that just looks good on the outside. You've outgrown the need to be right. You've outgrown the need to be validated. And that kind of evolution is the loudest form of success there is. You didn't need revenge because you realized you were the prize all along. They lost something valuable when they lost you. Not because you begged them to stay, but because you became something they'll never have access to again. Your energy, your loyalty, your presence. That's what they miss. And they'll never say it. They'll pretend like you didn't matter, but deep down they know. They know they mishandled someone rare. In your success, it's a daily reminder of what they threw away. Not because you flaunt it, but because you live it. Because your peace now is louder than their chaos ever was. Some people try to destroy what they don't understand. They try to silence what makes them uncomfortable. And when they can't, they turn to sabotage. But you proved them wrong without saying a word. You proved them wrong by continuing to love, to build, to thrive. You didn't lose your softness, but you found your strength. You didn't close your heart, but you protected your peace. And now the very things they tried to use against you, your kindness, your honesty, your silence, have become the very things that elevate you beyond their reach. That's how success becomes your story. Not because of what you did to them, but because of what you chose to do for yourself. Let them wonder how you made it. Let them sit with the reality that while they played games, you were building something real. Let them watch your joy and call it luck, because they'll never understand the pain it took to get there. They'll never know the battles you fought in silence. The nights you held your own hand because no one else showed up, but you showed up for yourself again and again. And now your life is the evidence. Your life is the justice. not because it's perfect, but because it's yours, built from ashes, built from grace, built from the kind of strength that doesn't scream but survives. You've reached a place they can't follow, not because you pushed them away, but because your growth required distance. And now your light shines in ways it never could when you were weighed down by revenge. You let go, you rose, you rebuilt, and now every step forward is a message. You won without war, you healed without hate, you grew without games. That is what makes your success so powerful. It speaks where words fail. It heals what wounds tried to destroy. And it tells a story louder than any scream for vengeance ever could. You are the proof that strength doesn't retaliate, it rebuilds. And your life is the living testimony. So if you're standing in the ruins of betrayal, if your heart is heavy from the wounds they left behind, if you're tempted to fight fire with fire just to feel seen, pause, breathe. And remember this, your healing is louder than their harm. Your peace is deeper than their lies. And your rise will echo louder than anything they tried to destroy. You are proof that scars don't mean you're finished, they mean you survived. And not just survived, but grew. You became better in silence. You became stronger without applause. You found power in restraint. And now your success walks ahead of you, carrying every ounce of pain and turning it into purpose. They tried to break you, but they only built you. They tried to silence you, but your growth is screaming. They tried to erase you, but look at you now, unbothered, unshaken, and undeniable. So walk in your truth, own your light, and let your life continue to speak what your words never had to say. God bless you. Thank you for giving your heart the time to heal and your soul the space to rise. Stay tuned for more powerful, soul-shifting content because your story isn't over. It's only just beginning.